exhausted the heck out of it. I want to look at this, if I can find it, I don't know where it is now. I have my other book I've left someplace, but there's a section here on the augurs and harospec. A harospec is someone who reads livers. Why did they read livers? Because, as he'll explain it here, can anyone find that section on that? I don't know where it is now. Of course, we've all got different section books here. So, I don't know if I can find it. Then the bird flight. The augur reads bird flights, but I don't find the section of the reading. Because I somehow misplaced my other book. Anyone find this bird flight, augur, reading liver deal? I think here it is, divination, here it is. It's in the Painted Tombs of Tarkina, Part 1. Birds fly portentously on the walls of the tomb. The artist must often see those priests, the augurs, with their crooked bird-headed staffs in their hands, out at a high place, watching the flight of larks. Towards the end of Tarkina 1, I don't have the exact page for you. My book is 61 here, but we've got different numbers. They were reading the signs of importance, looking for an indication how they should direct the course of some serious affair. To us it may seem foolish, to them, and here's the key to understanding. Hot-blooded birds flew through the living universe. Now, only a Lawrence could figure this one out. As feelings and premonitions fly through the breast of a man, or if you like a woman, or as thoughts fly through the mind. In their flight, the suddenly roused, hot-blooded birds, lovely word. In their flight, the suddenly roused birds, or the steady, far-coming birds, moved wrapped in a deeper consciousness in the complex destiny of all things. And since all things correspond in the ancient world, and man's bosom mirrored itself in the bosom of the sky, or vice versa, the birds were flying to a portentous goal in a man's breast, or a woman's breast, who watched, as well as flying their own way in the bosom of the sky. If the augur could see the birds flying in his heart, then he would know which way destiny too was flying for him. Well, that is the most incredible description of what augury is that I have ever read. Now, I don't know if you feel that. Who cares if you like what augury is? But, you know, when you do drive your car and you take a walk, particularly this kind of weather, or the spring or the fall, and you see the flights of birds, you know, you get a funny feeling often that they're speaking to you sometimes. They mean something to you. You see something like that, and it's obviously just in your imagination. But Lawrence here explains that the ancient peoples felt that way too, and therefore they tried to read these things. And his description, you know, how these things correspond is really amazing. So how would he know that? He didn't go to college like we did in a class like this to find it out. He had to discover it himself in his own being. And he looked into himself, and he was a kind of prophet, if you like. And so we see how much influence he's had in ways beyond fiction, as I say, in the area of sexual liberation and ecological insight. This is where his insight and creativity has expressed itself most, I think, in a way that many of us are unaware of. The science of augury certainly is not an exact science, but what's exact is our science, let's say, of psychology or economy. And augurs who are as clever as our politicians who also practice divination. You know, Reagan's wife used to look at astrology before she let him go anywhere. The day he was shot, I guess she didn't consult the astrologers. If ever they were ever to do anything worth the name, there's no other way when you're dealing with life. And the ancients always consulted augurs, oracles before they acted. Because the most frightening thing for man or woman in life is to decide something and to have to act on it. And you need some sort of bolster, usually, to give you the feeling that you're doing the right thing or you're going in the right direction, because every path takes you in a different direction and you can't go back on it. It's true in personal relationships, it's true in professional things, even choosing what school you go to. All these things determine your path in life. The ancients called it destiny. There's no other way when you're dealing with life. And if you live by the cosmos, that's what his philosophy is, living by the cosmos. You look into the cosmos for your clue. If you live by a personal God, you pray to that God. If you're rational, you think things over. But it all amounts to the same thing. Prayer, thought, studying stars, watching bird flights, studying entrails of a sacrifice. That's a haruspex, H-A-R-U-S-P-E-X. Has it on this page, H-A-R-U-S-P-E-X. It all depends on the amount of true, sincere, religious religion you bring to bear on your object. An act of pure attention, if you can, will bring its own answer, and you choose the object like meditation. Concentrate upon, which will best focus your consciousness. Every real discovery made, every serious, significant discovery ever reached was reached and made by divination, he claims. Columbus discovered America by a sort of divination. The soul stirs and makes an act of pure attention, and that is discovery. The science of the auger or the haruspex was not as foolish as our modern sciences like economics. If the hot liver of the victim, and here's the haruspex now, cleared the soul of the haruspex and made him capable of that ultimate inward attention which alone tells us the last thing we need to know, why quarrel with the haruspex? To him the universe was alive, the whole universe, and in quivering rapport. To him the blood was conscious. He thought with his heart. To him the blood was the red, talking about the Mexican ceremonies and the pyramids and the Aztec and other civilizations before that in Central America, of taking the heart or liver out of the victim and holding it up. What were they doing? What kind of crazy stuff was that? Well, here he tells you. He understands. I think he's right. I've never heard anyone tell it better. To him the blood was the red and shining stream of consciousness itself. Hence to him the liver, that great organ where the blood struggles and overcomes death, as it were, was an object of profound mystery. It stirred his soul, purified his consciousness, for it was also his victim. So he gazed into the hot liver that had, strange lines and maps. Every liver apparently is different. That was mapped out in fields and regions like the sky of stars. But these fields and regions were those of the red shining consciousness that runs through the whole of animal creation, and therefore it must contain the answer to its own blood's question. It's the same with the study of stars. Whatever object will bring the consciousness into a state of pure attention in a time of perplexity will also give back the answer to that perplexity. But it's truly a question of divination. Well, you see, you have some really interesting insight into living by the cosmos, the real quick of death, and I really have to end it there and move on to a little bit of the chosen. But if you have any question about Lawrence before I move on, and I'll sum it up at the end, let me ask you now. Anyone want me to say anything more about Lawrence? It's an easy read, and I'll ask you to discuss some of these things like divination, the haruspex, living by the cosmos, things of that kind in an essay. So you can bring your books, you can bring some notes on note cards, and hopefully you can write something that Noel can understand. Has some meaning for you. And look at the chosen here. Remember we said that this is about two young religious boys. The first group are more religious. Danny is the representative of the first group of a Hasidic sect that the Jews call Hasidism. We have them here in Long Beach, up on Long Beach Boulevard. You see them, black costumes, beards, and things. There are different groups of Hasids. Most of them follow an individual called the Rebbe, R-E-B-B-E. Danny is the son of one of these leaders. As he says in page 9 of chapter 1, the first page in my book, They go back to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is this, means master of the good name. So Jesus is really, in Christianity, kind of Baal Shem Tov. He's always able to do miracles in the name of God. So master of the good name would be someone who could do miracles in the name of God. It's a kind of latter-day Jesusism in Judaism, following these spiritual, almost magic conscious leaders. They often are interested in what is now popularly called Kabbalah, pronounced by some Kabbalah, but I think the pronunciation is Kabbalah. Many people up in the entertainment world are interested in this kind of thing these days. It's gotten a little bit chic since Madonna and some others have begun to promote it. I think even that I don't know what's that kind of music. That's I can't remember what it's called. Another sort of musician who's been visiting the Holy Land recently. Several of these women musicians have been visiting the Holy Land. Are into this sort of stuff. So that's obviously gripped the music world if nothing else. They claim some interest in this hidden mystical tradition. That's what Kabbalah represents. The word means to receive, and what you receive is the hidden mystical tradition. So since different people can receive it in a different transmission, you have different rabbis from different areas of Central Europe, and many of them came in the late 19th, early 20th century, particularly with the rise of fascism and so on, to New York and other places, Los Angeles. And one area of New York where they're very prominent is Brooklyn, and in particular Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So this, as you see in the first page, takes place in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So he talks about the refugees there. Different stores owned by different groups, different refugees, Jews, Irish, Spanish. There's also now a lot of interrelationship with Afro-Americans and some conflicts there that have been more severe in the past than they are in the present. Anyway, you can see some other encounters wearing black skull caps, second page, full beards, long ear locks, side curls. The reason why do they wear side curls and things like that? Because in the Bible, in certain places in the law area, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and they shall be for frontlets upon your face or something like that, talking about the hair being a sign of allegiance to God. So they take that literally, not symbolically, and they let these frontlets grow. And they also speak about forget how they put it, fringes of your garment. So they wear these garments with fringes with the name of God in bold blazoned on them. It's in the Bible. If you're a serious person about the Bible, you'll find it there. Because they take these things extremely literally. And that's why this odd garb that often sets them apart from we moderns, as Lawrence would call us. Beards, earlocks, and they eke out a meager living, and so on and so forth. What's Danny's last name? Danny what? What? No, what's his last name here? Reuben is the other character, but Danny is the son of the Danny Sanders, he's called here. I see you guys are reading fast and furious in this book. Page 17, you'll find him. And Reuben's last name? Malter, M-A-L-T-E-R. Reuben is just a regular Orthodox Jew. And Judaism is divided into lots of different groups. We think of these things as single wholes, but they're not. It's Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform are sort of trying to modernize and fit into the society. It developed in Germany in the 19th century, where you have people going to a temple instead of a synagogue. The reason they call it a temple is because they want to say that they're not interested in the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. Their temple is wherever they are. In other words, they've given up the idea of a return to Zion, which is part of their prayer. Zion we discuss, but it's the center of the Davidic monarchy in Jerusalem. And so they've given up the idea of a restoration of the temple and a return to Zion, and they're talking about the temple wherever they are. That's why some Jews call their religious institutions temples, others call them synagogues. Synagogue is a Greek word, and it simply means meeting house and study hall, where the people meet and study. So it's not a temple where priests and so on perform rituals. It's a big difference. For the average layman, it would be no difference at all. They wouldn't understand, oh, you go to temple. It would be like you go to synagogue. But the two things are totally different in the history of this culture. The conservative tried to take a middle ground, and the Orthodox were extremely orthodox in terms of holding to the law, the ancient traditions and customs, the letter of the Mosaic Law as interpreted by the rabbis through this literature called the Talmud that developed sort of like the New Testament did and early church literature. The two sort of developed side by side. To some extent, two sides of the same coin. One not interested in the law, but at peace with the Roman Empire ultimately and taking over the Roman Empire, Pauline Christianity, comes out of what we call Phariseeism. And Phariseeism, like it or not, is the Paul, for instance, is the source of that Christianity which we took over the Roman Empire, developed into Rabbinic Judaism. And Paul calls himself a Pharisee of the Pharisees. So we have Pauline Christianity, which is the Christianity we know. There's also sectarian Christian groups that are not Pauline, that consider Paul the Antichrist. But these were buried in the Roman Empire around the 300s and haven't functioned much in our modern world until we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which seem to have a lot of anti-Pauline tendencies in them. And the Gnostic Nag Hammadi materials also have a lot of anti-Pauline tendencies in them. So we found a lot of ancient documents that begin now to change our view of the history of these things. But the Christianity we know is mainly Paulinized, which is, and Paul is out of a Phariseeism, and Phariseeism mainly was interested in getting along where you were, accommodating yourself to the local conditions. Christianity did a great job of that, as we know, absorbing Easter eggs, Christmas trees, and lots of other things. We're about to enter into one of the pagan festivals Christians absorbed. Jesus certainly wasn't born, if we can tell anything about his birth, in the winter time, because it's all about lambs being birthed and things like that. The pictures of the creche and so on. The festival we're celebrating is the Roman Saturnalia, which was right after the winter solstice and the rebirth of the sun. This has nothing whatever to do with Jesus' birth. Things of that kind. Pine trees are North forest, pagan, much totem symbols. Reindeer are totem animals, and so on. Easter eggs, we just saw Easter eggs, pre-Christian materials in Etruscan tombs. So all these things, Christianity was extremely successful in absorbing. And that would be a kind of Phariseeism, again, in the Pauline approach to how you do things. So Rabbinic Judaism was similar. That was what Orthodox Judaism would be. I said conservative Judaism tried to take a middle stand between reform. Don't reform too much. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Keep certain things. Zionism is a reaction to Reform Judaism. Because where the reformers in the 19th century were saying, look, we've got to give up temples, we've got to be German citizens, we've got to be French citizens, We got to be American citizens, we got to be English citizens, we got to live wherever we are and be like Frenchmen, Germans, and so on. So in the First World War, you get Jews fighting on the French side, Jews fighting on the German side. Jews winning the Iron Cross in Germany, people that Hitler later arrested and put in concentration camps and exterminated. Jews fighting for France, even though you had the Dreyfus trial in France right before the First World War. So Jews had already decided they were going to live wherever they want, wherever they should. And then the Zionists came along in the early 20th, late 19th, early 20th century, before the Second World War, even before the First World War, they started talking like this, seeing the tremendous anti-Semitism in Europe that you're also seeing on the rise again. Said, well, we're not going to be able to live in Europe, whatever happens, because of the various situations that we find ourselves. The only hope is that we have a sovereign country, that we can live in a sovereign country. So actually, what the Reform Jews threw out in making a temple, the Zionist Jews put back in. They said, oh no, the only hope is in fact returning to our own land, having our own government, and having our own sovereignty, because otherwise we're going to constantly be hunted down and persecuted and exterminated. And they, I think, unfortunately, were probably correct. Hitler and what happened in Europe in the middle of the last century more or less proved that they were correct in their assessment, at least of the situation in Europe. So what the world is wrestling with in the present situation is the outcome of that assessment. So that idea about Zionism is going to permeate this book, because you see the Orthodox Jews too in this book are against Zionism. They want to live where they are. Danny's father is a total anti-Zionist. You think that we have Jews are all the same, but we don't. They're all, someone said, well, you got 3 Jews in a room, you got 4 different opinions. It isn't as if they're a unified whole, and this idea of the protocols of the elders of Zion, that there's a plot to take over the world, is total nonsense, and no Jews ever agree with each other. They could plot anything. They're very independent-minded and extremely argumentative with each other, so I don't think you'd ever get a conspiracy of Jews because they're not able even to agree with each other on anything, at least the ones I've met. So I think that's just, again, part of the superstitious literature that came out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, for instance, is a Tsarist tract. It's been proven to be a Tsarist tract circulated by the Tsarist secret police against the socialist agitation in Russia that was overthrowing the Tsarist monarchy around the beginning of the 20th century, the 1900 period. But it was actually based on a French text. It's lately been proved to have been based on a French text that was written to oppose the Napoleonic Restoration in France. So these things undergo tremendous transmutation, but these are still being published in places like the Arab world, Japan, and other places, as if they're authentic history, which is one of the problems with literature. It gets taken as authentic history. So to go back to the situation that we have in this book, Danny's father is opposed to Zionism. Reuben's father is totally mesmerized by Zionism, because he feels it's the only hope after the Holocaust, where millions were destroyed in the Second World War. You can argue about the numbers, but 6 million is probably a pretty accurate assessment of the number that were exterminated. If you go through a thing like that, you can understand why Reuben's father feels the way he feels. Anyway, on page 10 here, Danny attends a small yeshiva established by his father. Yeshiva means school. The word yeshiva is based on the Hebrew word yoshev, to sit down. So it's a place where people sit. What do? They sit down and study. So that's why it's called a sitting place. So he sits in a sitting place, a school in effect, which his father established in this place in Brooklyn called Crown Heights. And I attended another such school, but it was more liberal, where my father taught. Our school offered more English subjects. We tried to study modern Hebrew, like the State of Israel, for instance, would do. They studied a thing called Yiddish. Yiddish is a language that grew up in Central Europe, hardly spoken by Jews anymore because most Jews who spoke it were exterminated. Doesn't have any currency anymore. I don't think there's maybe 2% of Jews know it. But back in the late 19th century, all Jews would have known it, except Jews from Arab and Islamic countries. It's a kind of Middle German. It's the language that was spoken in Central Europe in the Middle Ages, a kind of German, pre-modern German, with bits of Hebrew mixed into it, and written in Hebrew script rather than Anglo script. So it's an amalgamation, mostly German of a medieval kind, mixed with a little bit of Hebrew thrown in. And that's why it sounds so odd, but it actually probably sounds something like the way German probably was spoken around the 13th century. That's what that is. It's called that because in German, Yid is the word for Jew. Yehuda, Yid, from the word Judah. Anyway, so the schools that they went to had sports teams, and they particularly liked baseball. So one Sunday afternoon, page 11, we were all out there playing, and our school was playing the other school. This coach is a man, if you see on page 11, called Mr. Galanter. I don't know if you have the same numbering pages as I have. Maybe it's your page 5 or 6, because they keep on changing these books. So you're about 5 or 6 pages earlier than me. So if I give you a page number, you'll know the one that we're talking about. So he describes the game and the hostility of the two teams, throwing the ball around here on, I guess it's around page 7 or 8 in your book. There were 15 of them that came in, the other ultra-Orthodox Hasidic group. Were dressed all alike, white shirts, dark pants, white sweaters, small black skull caps or little round caps that they wear on their head. The Orthodox manner, hair closely cropped except for the side curls that tumble down in long curls at the side of their head. And they all wore traditional undergarment, the tzitzit as he calls it, T-Z-I-T-Z-I-T, the fringes. It's the Hebrew word for fringes. The long fringes appended to the four corners of their garment. And all this is based on in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, if you read it closely, about fringes and things of that kind. We didn't wear these things. They did, so they are much more, if you like, ultra-Orthodox than we were, according to the narrator. So the game goes on, and to make a long story short, it's a very good beginning, I think. This Danny guy can't do anything wrong. Who's that one batting, he asks at one point one of his friends. That's Danny Sanders, he's introduced to you. Who is he? He's Reb Sanders' son. Reb Sanders is the leader of their movement, something like Elijah Muhammad, if you like, for black Muslims. Though not with the following that Elijah Muhammad probably had, because there were small little groups of these Hasidic people, and depending on what town they came from in Russia or Poland or Romania or someplace like that, they'd all have a different Reb or Rebbe leading them. So this is one little group that this Danny Sanders was a part of. He was a good deal taller than I, and in contrast to my somewhat, what page is this, 12? Taller than I, and in contrast to my somewhat ordinary but decently proportioned features, his dark hair, his face seemed to have been cut from stone. His jaw and cheekbones were made of jutting hard lines. His eyes were deep blue, sparse tufts of hair on his chin. So he describes him, his hair the color of sand. He moved in a loose-jointed, disheveled way, all arms and legs, talking Yiddish to his teammates. This guy is almost the perfect person Have you, when you went to school, high school or wherever, do you remember, probably grammar school or elementary school more, middle school, there was always some people who were perfect, who did everything right, who couldn't fail, who were the best athletes, who were the best students, and so on and so forth. They seemed like they were naturally born to doing this. Often it was never yourself. It was always somebody else. I don't know. Have you encountered such people when you were young? There are people like this who shine when they're young, particularly when they're very young, and are like the incarnation of perfection in almost all things. Well, that's Danny Sanders for Reuben, at least Reuben's view of it. Later on, we'll see that he has feet of clay. He's not so perfect and so on. But in Reuben's first encounter with him, Reuben sees himself as what? A jerk. By comparison to this Danny guy who is all things perfect. But rather cruel too, in Reuben's eyes. A little bit overbearing and capable of cruelty as far as he perceives it. What's the cruelty that this Danny is capable of? He thinks that Danny purposefully hits the ball. He's so perfect that he can hit a ball so hard and aim it at at Reuben's face and knock his glasses and break his glasses. In those days you had the glasses with glasses and not plastic and unbreakable things that we have now. You could get hit by a ball and the glass could go in your eye, which is what happens. So he thinks that Danny did this on purpose. Okay, I believe that Danny probably wanted to hit him if he could. But to be able to aim it right at his face and hit him in the eye and knock his glasses out and bang it into his eyes, I think is beyond the perfection of even this Danny chap. But that's why he thinks he's cruel. I don't think that Danny's particularly cruel. He just plays hard, and this Reuben guy got on his nerves. So it's like you're sliding into a base and you slide into the base with your cleats up. You know, you just want to teach the guy a lesson if you can. And Danny was a hotshot. He's also a natural. He's laid back. So anyway, this is quite a good introduction. Have you read this? Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it? It reads pretty good. It's fun to read. People who read this book actually like it, so I hope that you'll take the time to. So he goes into this game as we're seeing it here, and on page 18, they're yelling back and forth. You're Reuben Malter, Danny says to him. Your father is David Malter, the one who writes articles about the Talmud. Your father thinks he's a big scholar, right? Yes, yes. I told my team we're going to kill you a pluralism this afternoon. A pluralism. See that word there on page 18? I don't want to write it. You can see it in the book there. What's an pluralism? Well, it's sort of like the religious people calling the lesser religious people unbelievers, heretics. And you won't believe it. This is how crazy these things are because it's out of the Talmudic literature. See, the Talmud is, I'll put it up here. Apokris. It actually is from the Greek Epicurean. Epicurean. You see it. It is from the Greek Epicurean. And it was a word going back to Greco-Roman times to accuse Jews who were backsliders of being too interested. What are Epicureans? They like beauty, they like art, they like good food, they like good living, of liking the beautiful things in life too much. So it's actually a slur going back 2,000 years to a situation in ancient Rome and Greece that has nothing whatever to do with Brooklyn. I guess you don't find that funny. But I think it's pretty funny. Anyway, that's the curse he's throwing at me. We wouldn't call Danny, or rather Reuben, an Epicurean. I don't think. He's about the last thing from an Epicurean that you could imagine. He's a very serious, too serious, dutiful person, and he's certainly not interested in the sensual, beautiful things of life. mostly interested in studying and scholarship. That's Reuben. In fact, Danny's more interested in the beautiful things in life, as it turns out. So the conversation goes back and forth, and finally they're not doing so well, the team that he represents and the team that Reuben represents. And so Reuben finally goes in. He's playing second base, I think. He goes into pitch. Before we get there, look there some more about pluralism on 23. Remembering Danny Sanders' promise that he would kill us apocalypse. The word meant originally a Jew educated in Judaism who denied the basic tenets of the faith, the existence of God, the revelation, the resurrection of the dead. To people like Reb Sanders, it also meant any educated Jewish person who might be reading, let's say, a modern book like Darwin, or who was not wearing fringes or side curls and this sort of thing. To Danny Sanders, I was an apokoros, despite my belief in God and my belief in the Torah, which is the book of Moses. I didn't have side curls and was attending a parochial school where we studied a lot of English, but this was an unheard of sin for them. So he explains in his own way. I think I gave a better explanation of what it meant. So the two have an instant love-hate relationship. Often you end up being really good friends with someone who you initially despised when you first met them. Probably the fact you despised them meant that you were either jealous of them or they frightened you. And after they get over the fear of each other, they become tremendous friends. So here on page, I guess it's 29 or so, right before the end of the chapter, he throws this final pitch because he wants to get done quickly. Danny's up at bat. I watched it head straight for the plate. I saw him go into a sudden crouch. In a fraction of a second before he hit the ball, I realized that he had anticipated the curve of the ball that I was throwing. He deliberately swung low. He says he does it on purpose. I was still a little off balance from the pitch, but I managed to bring my glove hand up in front of my face. Just as he hit the ball, I saw it coming at me, and there was nothing I could do. It hit the finger section of my glove, deflected off the glove, smashed into the upper rim of my left side of my glasses, glanced off my forehead, and knocked me down. I ran around wildly. Danny got to first base. I heard the coach, this Galanter chap, calling timeout. My glasses lay shattered on the ground. I felt a sharp pain in my left eye. My wrist throbbed, and the next thing he knows, he's in the hospital. And his father is coming to visit him. His father is a widower. He's in this chapter 2, this Brooklyn Memorial Hospital. The time, because it's World War II, in the hospital, you learn, it's really one of the first times he's with other people from outside his community. They're just rough sort of people from different cultures, Irish perhaps, Italian, who knows who these people are, older people in this hospital. But they're all listening to the radio, and they're all talking to him in the hospital. I guess the guy's name is Mr. Savo, so I suppose he's supposed to be Italian, probably, with that name or something to that effect. So page 41, Mr. Savo, sir. Yeah, kid? What day is it today? He took the chicken bone out of his mouth. It's Monday. Monday, June 5th. That's right, kid. I guess he was a professional prize fighter originally, this guy. So they're having a little chat in there. And what's June 5th? The day of the invasion of Europe. So the Allied troops are about to land in Normandy. He's in the hospital, and there, so you know exactly what is going on in the background. Page 48. Reuben's father comes to visit him. He's a nice fellow. And he said, Rep Sanders called me twice today. He wanted to apologize. Once last night, I heard my father saying softly. But the kid, Reuben, doesn't want anything to do with this Danny fellow. The father Danny's father wants to send him in to apologize to Reuben for what happened. I hate that Danny Sanders for this. He's making you sick. Danny Sanders making me sick. Reuben's father said he's not making me sick. He deliberately aimed at me, Abba's papa. He hit me deliberately. Now you're sick worrying about me. He hit you deliberately? You should know how he hits. His team would kill us at pluralism. Pluralism? You turned this into a game of war? What? His father is amazed at all this sort of thing. So it's a nice little, conference back and forth between them, and we're in chapter 3. And they're listening to the radio. I guess this is page, 54? The radio was still blaring. It was talking about places like Cannes, Carentan. If you've seen Band of Brothers, you know about the Battle of Carentan. The 101st Airborne guys fought the Battle of Carentan, and that's one of the episodes in Band of Brothers. That's originally on the public television and History Channel. So those are the battles of Normandy, the British Airborne Division, bridgeheads, and things that are going on like that. So, and he describes that. It's the invasion of Europe, Mr. Sabo, the next page. And he has his tefillin, which are, and phylacteries, which are the prayer objects that religious Jews use. They put a little leather box, again from Deuteronomy or Leviticus, and it shall be between your eyes, it says, that you will inscribe the word of God between your eyes. So they put a little box with words from the Bible inside this box, and that's called, I forget what you would call it, but together, is that tefillin? I don't think so. But together they're called phylacteries. I think tefillin is what you wrap around your arm. Anyway, they say, and you will wrap it around your arm. So they wrap this around their arms and they put this around their head. They're very beautiful, as you see. It makes them look very odd to other people, and that's why I guess people shied away from them or treated them like maybe you would treat a gypsy or something, because they had these customs that were so different. So they're called here tefillin, T-E-F-I-L-L-I-N, and phylacteries. You'll see those two words there on approximately page 55 or 6. And both of them, Danny and this boy, do that sort of thing. But most other Jewish people don't do that sort of thing anymore. On page 61 then, Danny Sanders comes in to see him. Sorry if I woke you. I looked up in amazement. And the two talk. I called your father last night. How does it feel to know you've made someone blind in one eye? So the two just do not get along. But after this conversation goes on for a while, it's really a pretty good conversation. Danny keeps coming back. He admits that he wanted to kill him. Don't be cute, Malter, he says. I'm not being melodramatic. I really wanted to kill you. So he gives this Malter fellow a lot of importance that he would even want to kill him. Look, if you're going to talk to me, call me Reuben, Malter finally says to him. And he said, I've never felt that way before, Danny says back to him. This is on page approximately, I don't know, 69 or something. I don't know exactly what it is in your book. He said, I never felt that way before. And there was Danny Sanders sitting on my bed, dressed in his Hasidic clothes, talking of wanting to kill me because I had pitched him some curveballs. So it's a pretty nice beginning to their friendship. And then they start talking about Danny's position. That he's going to succeed his father, but he also reads other things. Like he's been reading the famous novel Ivanhoe from Sir Walter Scott, and he confesses to Reuben that he's got a photographic memory, and he's also been looking into psychoanalysis. So he's been reading a lot of things that his father wouldn't approve of. And where has he been getting these things? As things will turn out in chapter 4 and onwards, he's getting them from the library. he's been going to the library in his spare time because he's such a quick read. And the person who he meets in the library is, as it turns out, Danny's father. So Danny's father has known this kid all along, but he's never told Danny about it. So this is where we're getting relations of fathers to sons. And so we get deeper into it, and as it turns out, as I told you, Reuben's father has met Danny, and let me get them mixed up. Reuben's father has met Danny in the library, so Reuben has known Danny all along. And he's the one who's been giving him these new, modern, secular books to read, because that's what he likes, and that's what he's interested in. The modern world, what's going on at the present time, and he's been feeding him psychoanalytic books, Freud and people like that, novels and things to read in addition to what he's been doing in his schooling. And so even when Danny's been, even when Reuben's been hit, and then he got mixed up in the face, Reuben's dad already knows the guy who hit him. He hasn't told his son this. That's why he's so surprised, I guess, when his son says he wanted to kill him, that Danny wanted to kill him. Okay, I'm getting confused here, but the point of the matter is you're getting deeper relations of fathers and sons. There's hardly any mothers here or sisters, actually. All fathers and sons. And you begin to see that these fathers are very tender towards their sons. It's nothing like James Baldwin describes, as you see. They love their sons. They would do anything for their sons. Even Danny's father is totally obsessed with the son. Training him, preparing him, caring about him. He wants to train him so much that he wants him to understand what suffering is, because he doesn't want him to feel that suffering is something new when he has to face it, because he's been through so much suffering himself. The father, this Danny's father, lost his brother in the Holocaust and other members of the family who were killed before he fled from Central Europe. That he treats Danny, as I told you earlier, in this weird way. He won't talk to him because he doesn't want to show the love he feels for him too much. So on the other side of it, Reuben's father is being very kind to this Danny in many ways, almost acting like an adopted father. In the meantime, Danny finally invites Reuben to meet his father in the environment, something like Elijah Muhammad's world, where he goes in and all the Hasidic members of the sect are there for the Sabbath and so on, and it comes to dinner. I don't know where this is. They start talking in chapter 4 about what's going on between Danny and Reuben. Danny and his father are talking about these things. And it even turns out that Danny's reading Hemingway, and they have these discussions. I can't read them all to you about, whether you're a believer, whether you're not a believer, how orthodox you are, how unorthodox you are. And that goes all the way to the end of book 1. So in book 2 starts on page 95, chapter 5. And this concerns really going to visit Danny's father. And when he goes to this dinner, chapter 7, the next day I met Danny's father. Chapter 7, what page is that? Chapter 7. Well, before you find out what page, let's look at the end of chapter 6. Reuben's father tells him the history of Danny's father's movement, which is really pretty interesting. It's all given to you in chapter 6, page 99. So he prepares him to meet Danny, and he talks about, for instance, on page, I think, 100 or 102, 101, 102, he talks about the Cossacks in the area where, in the 1600s, in the area where Danny's people come from, the massacres that occurred there. after these massacres at that time in central Poland, the Ukraine, those areas, many began to believe the Messiah was coming. So it's a messianic revival, something like Christianity was 1,600 years before. Remember, Reuben, there were Jews who believed in the Messiah. Believe also that just before the Messiah, there will be an era of great disaster. So he explains some of these false messiahs that have come since the scattering, what the Jews call the diaspora. Diaspora is a Greco-Roman word meaning dispersion. So he explains all of that in quite a good way. So as you're reading the novel, you're also learning. He speaks about this person, Shabbatai Tzvi, at the bottom, I think it's 102. And Shabbatai Tzvi is this sort of messianic personality that appeared among all the Jewish communities, and then it turned out that he was going to lead the Jews back to Palestine even then, and he failed. The Turkish Ottoman authorities in Istanbul arrested him, and he converted to Islam. They either gave him the choice of execution or Islam. He chose Islam, and that was a great disappointment to everybody. So out of all this, all these other movements in 1700s grew up. And then he tells about this Baal Shem Tov I told you about, the master of the good name. He was born about the year 1700 in Poland. His name was Israel. His parents were poor. He spent time with nature, with flowers. He read the Kabbalah. He lived in the Carpathian Mountains. So he tells you this whole thing about this Baal Shem Tov and how it developed. But after a while, it became led by people called tzaddikim. In Hebrew, this means righteous ones. And then there were mitnagdim, he speaks about the opponents. Mitnaged means to be opposed to. The opponents of these Hasidim. So the Hasidim were led by righteous ones, who claimed to be righteous ones, also called Rebbes. And the other Jews, more Orthodox Jews, disapproved of this charismatic sort of thing. These Rebbe tzaddikim lived, he says, like Oriental monarchs here. It's in the middle of it's in 2 pages from the end of that chapter. Some of them were out and out frauds. That's Danny's, Reuben's father telling him about these sects. And so that's how things got corrupted. So, in any event, they talk about Reb Sanders' son and how his son is a genius. So in chapter 7, then Danny finally goes to meet, Reuben finally goes to meet Danny's father. Danny's grandfather, here is in the middle of chapter 7, was a well-known Hasidic rabbi. He had 2 sons. His father was the second of the 2 sons, and then the older son, as it turns out, vanishes or is killed. And it's a pretty tragic situation from where he comes from. And things are pretty tough, and he describes the whole thing about their background. So this is quite interesting in terms of learning about this group. Let's see. Well, as it goes on, and this dinner goes on here, this is a very long chapter. Let's see, there's quite a lot going on in this chapter 7. Basically, what's going on here is that they play a game at dinner. Tell me, in the middle of the chapter, I don't have the right page for you. My book, it's 121. You know mathematics? My son tells me you're a good at mathematics. Yeah, there's a movie made about this book, and you can hear some of the accents in the movie if you hear some of these lines, because the movie follows pretty closely the book. You can get it at the tape store. Who plays Danny? Pretty well-known Hollywood actor. Anyway, so you know Hebrew, son of David Malter, he knows Hebrew? Yeah, he does, and so on. Well, that he gives passages from the Talmud, their religious study book. And they talk about these passages, but the father deliberately makes a mistake. And the key is that the son is supposed to pick up on the mistake. Be able to trip up, the father, to show the father, to know where the father makes a mistake, so that the son can show that he knows as much or more than the father. And so Danny's father does this to Reuben too. And I think Reuben, being a pretty good student himself, picks up on the mistake, and Danny's father is really impressed by that. So he's talking about this further along, this code that they have here. The world kills us. The world flays our skin from our bodies. The world laughs at Torah. This is the dad, Danny's dad talking. But Torah is the law, but if you study it, then there's this secret code, gematria, he talks about, which is writing it back to front. That's where they get things like the Bible code, which was a famous book recently. And he talks about how these codes work, and it turns out that Reuben knows something about these things. Okay, so towards the end of the chapter, they pick up on the mistake. And after it's all done, Danny goes home, Reuben goes home, and he's sitting at the table with his father at the end of that chapter. I sat at the kitchen table and slowly told my father everything that had taken place at Reb Sanders' house the page before the end of that chapter. He sipped his tea and listened. I spoke about this gematria, this numerology, this secret code that they have, and the tricks that they play. It was a terrible experience, he tells his father. My father shook his head, no, it's not terrible, Reuben. Not for Danny, not for his father, not for the people who listen. It's an old tradition. These games that they play, and so on and so forth. It just seemed cruel to me, Reuben said. My father, yeah, it's a little cruel, but that's the way the world is, and so on. So they discuss it, and they have a pretty good talk. Well, as the book continues, it turns out that these two become fast friends, and Danny's father communicates with his son through Reuben. I think he explains this a little bit in chapter 8. I don't know if I can find it for you, but it's around, it's in chapter 8, 2 pages before the end of chapter 8. Reb Sanders looked at me and sighed. Reuben, he said, I want you to hear me. No one lives forever. My father led his people before me, and my grandfather before that, and my great-grandfather before that. 6 generations we've led our people. I'll not live forever. Daniel will take my place one day. Does his son want to take his place? As it turns out, he doesn't. And finally, it's going to be the younger brother who's going to take his place. That's what's going to happen at the end of the book. Danny's going to go shave off his beard, his forelocks, shave off whatever it is that distinguishes him as a Hussid, and he's going to go across the East River like Walt Whitman to Manhattan from Brooklyn. This is Walt Whitman's world, as you see, here in Brooklyn. And he's going to go to Columbia University and study psychiatry because of the influence of Reuben's father on him. But the dad doesn't know this at the moment. He knows his son is suffering a crisis of conscience. Then he went on in a hoarse little voice. My son is my most precious possession. My most precious possession. This is a great book for people who want to learn maybe how fathers should treat sons, wives who feel that their husbands aren't treating their sons properly, or daughters properly, their children properly. Give this book to your husband or future husband to read. Maybe he'll calm down a bit and not knock people around too much. Maybe he'll pay the bills that he's supposed to pay in order to take care of his children. This is a great book for that kind of thing. I think you'll all agree with that. Not many people around. Most people think that they're their own most precious possession, not their children. My father knocked me around, I'm going to knock my kid around. My father didn't pay for me, why should I pay for you? kind of thing you hear in lots of families. These people don't feel like that. Totally different approach, as you can see. And that's what's so moving, I think, about this book. My son is my most precious possession. I have nothing in the world compared to my son. I must know what he was reading. I cannot ask him. He's worried. How did he come to meet your father in the library? What's going on? And I was very still and said nothing. I realized I was sitting on top of an explosion between Danny and his father. How long would Rep. Sanders remain silent about his son's visits to the library? I didn't like the way my father seemed to appear in all this, as if he were conspiring behind Rep. Sanders' back to contaminate his son. I took a deep breath, began to talk slowly, choosing my words. I told Rep. Sanders everything, how Danny had met my father, why my father was suggesting books for him, and that Danny was studying Freud, and Rep. Sanders just sat there. I saw his lips move beneath his hand, and I heard the words psychology, Darwin, and then a moan. What can he do? He said to himself. I can no longer speak to my own son. What can I do? Master the universe. Oh, so many troubles. And I was very moving portrait even of Danny's father, which you don't like. Well, the problem comes as the history develops after the war is over in chapter 10. They find out, you get the breakout from Saint-Lô, you see. We're following D-Day in chapter 10, and then as time goes on, they learn about what happened to the Jews in Europe. That comes in chapter 11 after the Battle of the Bulge, you see, chapter 11, Battle of the Bulge is taking place. All this is going to take place against the background of the end of World War II. Chapter 11, for instance, we get patents break out in the Saar area, and then they come upon the concentration camps. So in the end of that chapter, if you look towards the end, 2 pages from the end again, I just couldn't grasp it. The number of Jews slaughtered had gone from 1 million to 3 million to 4 million, and finally we realized 6 million had been killed. How could this have happened? And they go on about the pain that they're feeling as a result of that. My father blinked his eyes. Reb Sanders said it was God's will, he echoed softly. You're satisfied with that answer, Reuben? No, I'm not satisfied with that answer. We cannot wait for God. A madman has destroyed our people, our treasures, and so on and so forth. So towards the end of that, I think it seems to me that Reuben even goes to live in Reb Sanders' house for some reason. In any event, just to finish up before we talk about the exam, the rest of this book is about how Danny's father, because of what he's seen, becomes very active in the agitation to start the State of Israel. You know, the State of Israel was born in 1948 with the UN resolution. And in 47, 48, the Arab-Israeli war started. The British authorities were supposed to be controlling things in the Middle East. They weren't doing an effective job. Both sides were involved in terrorism. The British finally were ready to pull out. The UN tried to step in, something like in Iraq or in the Sudan, were unable to step in. 2 sides began to fight it out. And meantime, Reuben's father is giving speeches in New York. Danny's father disapproves of all these things. He thinks this is all secular things. God has to do things, not men. You just wait for God to do things. You don't do things yourself to alter the situation. So from that moment on, he orders Danny not to speak to Reuben anymore. And the whole area where they go to school now, they're going to high school together, is split. And in the lunchroom, the 2 sides don't even sit with each other. They don't talk to each other. Apparently, Reuben's father's given a big speech at Madison Square Garden, and Danny's father's heard about it. So they split over that. And it's very painful because by this time, Reuben really does like Danny a lot. And finally, after all said and done, after the war in Palestine is basically over, after the state is established, I guess, the end of chapter 16 at the end, That was all he said. Not a word about Zionism, not a word about the silence he had imposed on Danny. Nothing. I found I disliked him more than when I left him when I had entered. I did not see him again that July. This is when I think, he sees Reb Sanders almost for the last time. But at some point here, at the end of the book, Reb Sanders explains to Danny Reb Sanders explains to Reuben why he treated Danny the way he did. As he says at the very end here, last chapter, he was talking to Danny through me. Reuben, I want you to listen carefully to what I tell you now, he said. His eyes were sad. You won't understand, you may never understand, and you never know, stop hating me for what I did. I know now how you feel. I did not see in your eyes, but I want you to listen. A man is born into the world with only a tiny spark of goodness in him. The spark is God. In the south, the rest is ugliness and evil, a shell. The spark must be guarded like a treasure. It must be nurtured. It must be fanned into flame. It must learn to seek out other sparks. It must dominate the shell. Anything can be a shell, Reuben. Any indifference, laziness, brutality, genius, even a great mind. And then he goes on about being blessed with his son and how he was worried about it. And then further along, he taught me with silence. He taught me to look into myself, to find my own strength, to walk around inside myself, in company with my soul. When people ask me why he was silent, I guess his father had treated him that way. He would explain it and so on. So the whole last chapter is taken up in this, explaining to Reuben about his brother, that's Danny's father's brother, his death. And then finally Reuben meets Danny one day, and Danny's shaved off everything and is dressed like a normal modern person and is going to go to a modern college and is leaving everything. And now his father talks to him and everyone is reconciled. It's quite an interesting book. I did go through it for you, quite surprisingly. We did it in a quick form. You can read it yourself. And these are the kind of things we'll talk about on the exam. So, the exam. We'll have 3 questions on the exam. Maybe a few short answers, just to make sure that you've been following some of this stuff. Covering stuff we've mentioned in class. Nothing that we didn't mention in class will be asked as a short answer, but anything we mentioned is fair game. You can bring your books. One question will probably have to do with Black Elk again. And some of the things that were covered in that book, the Custer battle, the Wounded Knee, the Messiah religion, the dancing, the ghost dancing, the circle, the broken circle, why Black Elk agencies fail, things of that kind. Yet the kind of spirit Black Elk displays towards things. The Lawrence book, something to do with the cosmos, living by the cosmos, natural proportions, sonic consciousness, logarithm, bird flights, haruspecs, livers. What's all this got to do with living in the modern world in a different way than through organized religion? Living in a more personal way, living in touch and in harmony with nature, and living at ease, natural harmony with your sexual emotions. Those are the things I think that come through the Lawrence book. So I'll ask you to talk about some of those things. And then The Chosen, for those of you who've read it, this conflict of the two sides, more orthodox, the less orthodox, the pro-Zionists, the anti-Zionists, who Reuben is, who Danny is, what the conflict of their fathers are, the tenderness of fathers to sons, the total care they show for each other, the softness. Maybe compare this a bit with Baldwin's experience with his father. Maybe compare it a bit with Elijah Muhammad and his group, Danny's father and Elijah Muhammad. there's possible comparisons we could bring into play. Those are the three areas I'll try to ask you about. You choose two. And that's what we examine about. Any questions? I can see you understand it all. Good luck to you guys.
Thank you.